Kia ora. Good evening, I'm Neil Waka. Welcome to Inside New Zealand. In January last year, Warbird collector Sir Tim Wallis crashed his beloved Spitfire at the Wanaka airstrip, suffering severe head injuries and spending months recovering in hospital. He was lucky to escape with his life. Sir Tim's wife, Lady Prue, was swamped with inquiries from New Zealand and around the world on Sir Tim's condition, the media carrying daily reports for the weeks he remained in critical care. Before his accident, Sir Tim was in Russia, overseeing one of his most ambitious projects to date.
Okay, roll out.
As the sun sets on a remote Siberian airfield, a World War II Russian fighter starts up. It's a moment Sir Tim Wallis has waited a long time for. His dream of rebuilding a Polikarpov I-16, a plane that hasn't flown for 50 years, has been realised. Now only the ultimate test remains.
No, it's a little beast, really, isn't it? I should have looked like a bumblebee, but it's a bit bigger than a bumblebee.
You got a big smile on your face, Tim?
Yeah, well, I mean, 3 years. 3 years when Ray and I first signed the contract. And they're about a year behind. But then again, there's, something as difficult as this, you can't expect it to go exactly right. If he's happy with the taxiing, if he's happy with the way it's handling, he'll take it off.
The I-16 was Russia's frontline fighter when Hitler attacked. Tim Wallis will be the only person in the world to have one that flies.
I'm not sort of, I want to jump up and down. I'm not that sort of excited, but I think, in other words, just saying that it's been a challenge, and I think when you see a challenge coming to fruition, then there's a real good feeling that you get about it.
In Russia, things never go quite as planned. At the last minute, the Russian test pilot decides today is not the day. Fading light and a concern about the engine's oil pressure will keep the I-16 on the ground for now. But one day, this little plane will thrill the crowds in New Zealand at the Wanaka Air Show.
We're being attacked from the south, I think.
Tim Wallis has blazed many a frontier, but he's perhaps best known as the man behind New Zealand's biggest air show.
Now is a very evil-looking aircraft. That's the ME-109. But what a beautiful sight it is there. Silver wings.
He's taken the Wanaka Air Show from small beginnings to the biggest in the Southern Hemisphere, based around his own collection.
What the Japanese call it, the Whispering Death. Days an hour. Is that right? .1191, we're talking on.
Of all the aircraft in Tim Wallis's collection, and there's now 14, one will always be special. A plane which long ago captured the public imagination and Tim's own heart, the Spitfire.
For me, it's a great feeling and a great privilege. I believe that I've got a rare privilege to own one
and an even rarer privilege to fly one. Now, I remind myself of that every time I fly it. You can cruise along at 150 miles an hour quite gracefully, and then you can zip it up to 400 miles an hour. You really can use a lot of sky.
It's long been a dream of Tim's to have a collection which includes the main fighter aircraft of all the major powers that did battle in World War II. It's a mission that's taken him to all corners of the world, but more often than not to the UK. The quiet country villages of East Anglia and Cambridgeshire are the home of the best aircraft restorers and the biggest Warbird collectors.
And about 60,000 man-hours of work.
Men like Stephen Gray, the world's #1 collector, who houses his collection in a huge hangar at the Duxford airfield. The Englishman has one of the 3 Hurricanes left in the world that still fly.
Well, there she is.
You know, there are several...
Stephen Gray sold Tim his first Spitfire, and like him, flies his collection.
Yeah,
You want a kind like that, it's called the so-called Lockheed strut.
yeah. We've got that.
Oh, good.
There's the Mark I, I think, for the Mark II. We've got the Mark II.
Although neither would admit it, there is undoubtedly a rivalry between the two men. The aristocratic Stephen Gray has been #1 in the Warbird business for years. Tim Wallis, the Kiwi bush aviator, is catching up fast.
Well, I mean, my Mark V and my Hurricane are going to have all the guns, and other than the ammo, you know, other than the ammo, it's going to be stock.
Tim Wallis, too, will have a Hurricane once this pile of twisted metal is turned into a flying machine. The picturesque countryside of East Anglia is home of Hawker Restorations, a small company specialising in restoring old warbirds. Today, collectors fly in from around England to have a look at how Sir Tim's Hurricane is progressing.
There's the wing. It's all metal wing and centre section. It's an all metal tail. You know, it's still here.
Like most collectors, they want to know who's doing what, where and how. After months of work, the Hurricane's tail is ready.
I think actually we'll have Max. Where's Max gone?
The local media grab a few shots of the Kiwi who's pumping hundreds of thousands of pounds into their community. Tim's Russian partner Boris Nikiforov is here to see how the English do it. Here too are some of the younger up-and-coming collectors keen to hear Tim's story.
How I got involved with Warbirds really was that as a schoolboy we had Mustangs that were left over from the Pacific War. They actually arrived in New Zealand on the ship after the conflict was over. And as a schoolboy, these used to fly over Christchurch at 1,000 feet, full throttle, and you know how your back reacts to it. And we used to bicycle down to that base. I mean, that's how I became involved with Warbirds, never ever thinking that I'd be ever able to own one. No, actually, I mean, quite honestly, I mean, this gives me a greater pleasure than many years. I mean, I've been involved in very exciting businesses, but I mean, this here is it's a new challenge in your youth, isn't it? Well, it is. It actually, I tell you what, it keeps you younger. Well done, well done.
At last count, Tim had 5 major restoration programs on the go. This rapid expansion of his collection is driven in part by his age.
You know, just like Stephen Gray, because, you know, Stephen is in his 50s. I think he's a little older than me. And he wants to fly a number of Warbirds before he loses his license. And I'm a bit the same, actually. You know, you don't hold your medical forever. That's right. You know, it's an ambition to fly a Hurricane. It's an ambition to fly a Mark V. Yeah. I'll be flying my Yak 3 within a month. I've just got that rebuilt in Russia. I'm not going to fly the I-16. It's too much of a twitchy little aircraft because I busted my back in a helicopter accident. And, you know, I've only got one leg that works properly.
Well, actually, that one doesn't work at all, but as I say...
Tim was left partially paralysed after a helicopter crash in the winter of 1968. He was helping a friend by flying in feed to snowbound sheep when he hit power lines. He spent 6 months in the Warbird spinal unit.
Were you told that you would never be able to fly again?
If I was told that, I certainly didn't listen.
Were people dubious about letting you back into a helicopter to fly?
Well, if they did, they didn't tell me. I mean...
Do you think they would have?
I think my mother was dubious because I think that she thought that I'd had enough and I should, you know, change what I was doing. But she realised that I'm a born aviator and that's what I want to stay doing.
Tim, you have had a few accidents, haven't you? How many have you had?
Yes, I mean, you know, say if I've had a few accidents, I've had a few accidents in the nature of, you know, with the nature of my work, and I make no excuses for them. I mean, very seldom the aircraft lets you down. You usually let the aircraft down.
In many ways, though, it has been the crashes involving others that have hurt Tim Wallis the most. At Warbird's over Wanaka 3 years ago, Chipmunk pilot Ian Reynolds died instantly. Tim made the decision that the airshow would continue, and at a media conference later in the day, he was forced to defend his decision under some tough questioning from reporters.
When you have a car accident, do all the cars on the road stop and go and put them in the garages? I mean, that's the answer. I mean, was there a reason to stop the air show? We weren't being callous and carrying it on.
I think Warbird shows as a result of this accident, or was it one of those things?
If you saw how we handled it at the end there or during it, we tried to be respectful, yet continue the show. And really, I mean, when I get to bed tonight and it's all over, I'll be bloody happy. Because
This one's still all on target for 96.
look, I haven't even thought about 96. I mean, what I might have said up there was to keep the crowd just interested that we haven't thrown it away, which we haven't. But there's a bloody lot of work goes into it. And we've lost a mate. And we don't often show our emotions. But I mean, I've been through it in the dear days and everything. I've had to go and see husbands and wives, and mothers. It's not easy. But it happens.
The financial muscle that allows Sir Tim Wallis to search the world for warbirds has come from two things: helicopters and deer.
Right, this is a cripple deer farm now. We've got that mountain and we've got the, you know, all those deer down the valley down there.
Tim owns two big deer farms, one at each end of Lake Wanaka in central Otago. But before he moved into farming, Tim ran the biggest deer recovery operation in the country. A fleet of helicopters combed the hills, turning the meat and velvet of a pest into big dollars.
Well, we had the biggest operation, and when we were shooting, I think if you're talking about numbers of deer recovered back to the factory, in our height, we shot 35,000 in 1 year.
The big money soon drew others into the game. To stay in front, the shooters and pilots had to push themselves and their machines to the limit.
What sort of risks did you take?
We had margins that we worked to, and an unproductive pilot would have a very wide margin, and a very productive pilot possibly go over what you can say is sensible. But then again, you have to find these margins yourself. Really, you've got not a lot of people to teach you. Once you're out there in the hills, you've got no one watching you, and you're your own judge of what you're doing.
sort of hours were you working?
Well, I can remember logging 50 hours in under 5 days. Now, that's pretty pressurised flying. You've got to realise that, you know, the mountains were yours, the deer were over the mountains, and there wasn't any limitation other than weather limitations and daylight. And you'd basically start at daylight and end at dusk, and whatever you had to bring out, and sometimes you had to stretch daylight a little.
When the number of deer started to fall, Tim switched tack and pioneered live deer recovery, an even riskier job. Again, profits depended on numbers.
I don't think we broke the 10,000 mark, but we were somewhere between 9,000 and 10,000 live deer captured back to farms. Each one of those had to be captured individually, all offering difficult or, you know, challenging situations that, again, it, you know, that was, I believe, when you look back on it, that was really quite a feat.
Opening the big gates.
Tim has continued to look for an edge in the deer business.
Meeting the officials.
The quest has taken him to deepest Siberia, a region called the Gorny Altai.
We are deer farming ourselves here, mainly really to gain experience in what we should be doing in New Zealand. I mean, our company, or there'll be a few others that'll follow their ways. My case, we bought a large property. We're going to extensively farm and run deer like they do in Russia.
Is it hard operating, though, in Russia, in the Russian system, the Russian way?
Unbelievably hard.
Deer farming in Siberia is a primitive operation. In the Gorny Altai, there's no electricity, no running water, but velvet that's produced is the best in the world. Wallis's farm managers have found life almost unbearably tough here, and ideas Tim had of making money out of the venture were quickly forgotten.
Well, how tough it is. I mean, to make a profit out of it, I think you'd be dreaming, because you're a Westerner, and trying to break the system is very, very difficult. But we're actually learning an awful lot without having to try and say we want a profit in our pocket at the end of the day. What we've learned has been immense.
Pretty interesting way of chopping up meat.
Yeah, it's all happening, chopping up meat here.
Tim Wallis has been doing business in Russia during a time of immense upheaval and change. When he first came here, there were endless queues for basic foodstuffs. These days, markets are full of local and imported products. Tim owns 50% of a company called New Trade, which sells millions of dollars of dairy products and other goods to the Russians. And like most people doing business in Russia nowadays, Tim has felt the hand of the mafia. Tim and his business partner recently pulled out of a supermarket project with losses of over $1 million. The mafia was simply making life too difficult.
Our manager's son was murdered by the mafia. I learnt on this trip that another person we've been involved with was shot. His driver and his driver's wife were shot in the car. But look at the bank managers. I understand the mafia are moving into the banks in Moscow. 9 bank managers have either been poisoned, shot, or car bombed. Now that's a move.
So their reach is extensive.
It's very programmed and extensive, and I feel that the government are not taking hold of it quick enough, because the mafia becomes stronger the longer you leave it.
Does this frighten you in a business sense, in a personal sense?
When I'm in dangerous situation, I make sure I'm well looked after. And I won't explain that much further, but I'm careful. I know where not to tread, and I've been there long enough now to know how to be careful.
Tim's biggest investment in Russia now is restoring aircraft. Old aircraft, that is, made the way they were in the 1930s and 40s. But while the techniques look simple, like everything in Russia, it requires deep pockets and unbelievable patience. In recent years, Sir Tim Wallis has been a frequent visitor to the city of Novosibirsk, the grey, drab capital of Siberia. Unemployment here has soared since the Cold War ended. The city's aircraft factories are no longer part of the arms race. For many, a job in the future depends on Western entrepreneurs like Tim Wallis.
And Novosibirsk. And Novosibirsk. Yeah.
But the unsteady change from communism to capitalism means frightening financial risks for people like Tim.
But when you're actually manufacturing something in Russia that's rather unique and difficult, and it's in military plants, you know, you just have to go by feel and use your own judgment. I mean, what I'm doing is pretty unique, really. You know, it is. It's pretty unique. But, and I do believe that, you know, that there'll be a business in it. So can I categorically say it will be? I can't. You know, I only have to believe in it. Because really, at the end of the day, I mean, they must understand that if they want work, then there has to be a profit in it for me. And if there's not a profit in it for me, then I just go away.
The Russians were supposed to have the I-16 flying while Tim and his chief engineer, Raymond Queen, were in Russia. As usual, things haven't gone to plan.
It's very rough. It's much rougher than it was before.
Part of the problem is that under communism, decisions were made by committee, and old habits die hard. But as Tim says, that's Russia. Early on, he learned to grin and bear it. In the end, his patience will mean he's the first collector in the world to own a fighter of this type.
And, you know, the type of material they use here. You know, you look here at the welding and everything. It's very strong. You know, it's a very strong aeroplane, but it's, you know, it's a Russian aeroplane. It's Russian built. It's a Russian aeroplane. You know, it's totally basic. I mean, this here is the local wood. That's birch wood. And there are resins there. They're very strong resins. You know, the way that is. This design here is designed so you don't have to be a specialist to do it. I mean, there are some, you know, some parts there that are very specialised, but basically it's made so the average worker can go to a factory, get a job, and be part of building this aeroplane.
This is the fourth day in a row that Tim and his engineer Ray have made the 4-hour return trip to the deserted airfield. Each time expecting to see their $1 million project get off the ground. But things have gone from bad to worse. The heat of the Siberian summer gives way to late afternoon rainstorms on most days. Today is no exception. It's yet another frustrating delay, but of course, there's always tomorrow. The Sydney aircraft factory in Novosibirsk. Once it armed that evil empire.
Chikalov plant.
Now it's building I-16s for the multi-millionaire New Zealander. But Tim Wallis now worries that they are taking his money for granted, and he's about to give the Russians an ultimatum. Any more price hikes, and he'll walk away. Tim's project restoring I-16 supports 200 people. Without it, they'd have nothing to do. Some of the original workers are still here. The same people who churned out thousands of little fighter planes for Stalin's Air Force.
I better catch up.
Before the 90s, no Western businessman had ever set foot inside this factory.
Modification.
Now Tim is invited to look at Russia's supersonic fighters.
Sukhoi 27, the flanker.
Less thrilling for Tim is the massive cost overruns he's experiencing building planes here. Not only do the Russians have little to no understanding of modern business practice, but Soviet military culture often meant that planes or parts were thrown on the scrap heap. Rather than fix a problem, it was easier to build a new one. Time and money didn't enter the equation.
So how much did the cost escalate?
Well, I mean, the cost has escalated, I would say, 200 to 300%.
So do you get the feeling that, you know, you might be pouring money down
the
black
drain?
hole?
I certainly felt that a year ago. Like, I certainly felt that, what am I doing? But you have to have faith in the people. Like, I've got faith in the professor, I've got faith in Chemilov, faith in Behrens. They want to succeed. And so that's what you have to go along with. And you have to explain to them what it is to budget and keep to a budget.
But you desperately want this to work, but are you not just one man up against a huge system which may never let you win?
I've got more faith in Russia than that. You know, they're terrific people. I mean, I can honestly say they're becoming, some of my very good friends now are Russians. I like them. We're very similar. New Zealanders and Russians are very similar in their outlook. I mean, the only thing that I'm having a bit of trouble with is drinking the vodka.
Bottoms up.
In Russia, business and vodka go hand in hand. No vodka, no deal.
Tim does not come to Russia for business.
Natasha, you shouldn't sit
But he is only interested in beautiful women, vodka, and parties.
I admit I'm weak.
I do love the country. I do love the people. I mean, I find the vodka side a little tough, but they have their times that they celebrate. If they're depressed or they're unhappy about things, they also drink vodka. So they have highs and lows, and I think vodka is part of their life. And you have to fit into that part of their life.
VE Day celebrations in Christchurch 50 years on, and Tim Wallis throws the VE Day party. An airshow extravaganza Tim himself has underwritten. For Tim, this is all about remembering those who fought, remembering why they fought, and remembering what they fought for. 5 decades on, both the planes and the people who flew them are defying their age.
Hello, Bridget, how are you? Lovely to see you. What do you think of that? Did you love the airplane?
I've got to get my son to take him to the plane. Yeah, follow me around. Yeah, okay. You follow me.
The organiser, a modern-day hero, in 1993, the Queen rewarded with a knighthood.
Tim, what was your reaction when you learned that you were going to be knighted?
Well, I'd never, ever, you know, had given it any thought at all, because, you know, you don't think about those things. But when it was explained to me that, you know, it's me on behalf of everyone that's worked for me or with me, or to develop the deer industry, help develop it, or the aviation side, and someone has to be the fall guy. I understood and graciously accepted it.
Initially, though, you turned it down, did you not?
Oh, I mean, you're telling me this. I'm not telling you.
You sent me a fax.
No, I didn't. Well, I've forgotten about that fact. No. Look, you know, I think that there might have been a bit of misunderstanding at the start, but, you know, the fact that the honour has been bestowed and, on behalf of a lot of my friends right from the start, business colleagues, we've done it together. You know, to me, it's an honour for the company and the group of people we've been associated with.
Has it changed things for you?
It did a bit in the start, but then again, you know, you don't change the way you are. I don't try and use it to gain advantage. I certainly don't do that. I know that it's made my public commitments greater, but then again, I guess I've got a lot to share. I've got to be aware of that. It hasn't affected the family at all. It hasn't affected Prue. It hasn't affected the boys. We're still the same. I mean, I didn't go up a grade in cars or anything. I still kept my old Holden.
The old Holden and the even older Spitfire. Tim is often compared to Douglas Bader, a World War II English Spitfire ace who flew with wooden legs. Bader survived numerous crashes, never gave up, and defied incredible odds.
Righto, right. Right on. Parachute on.
Today, Tim will take to the skies for the South Pacific Fighter Pilots reunion.
So what sort of display are you doing today?
Well, I've got, it's all on the canopy. It's all here. I go into I use about 2,500 feet, come into a vertical dive, a clover leaf, then I go into Cubans, then I go into machine gun attacks, then I do canopy to the crowd, belly to the crowd, 45-degree Cubans, roll off the top, vertical dive.
This wreck was from Murmansk, right up on the Arctic Circle, on the top of Russia.
And where did you drag it out from?
Where it was shot down. It was on the Tundra Tiger. They call it the Tiger. It's
Sir Tim's dream of owning a Hurricane took its first step to reality when he used Russian helicopters to retrieve this wreckage from the frozen tundra, its resting place for 50 years.
So that sort of an environment actually is quite good for the keeping of the aircraft. Look, this here is the fabric of the aircraft up here. Now, you see, it's still, that's fabric, that's linen, and it's still, it still sounds like tearing linen, doesn't it?
While the Hurricane's frame is being restored in England, all the other restoration work is being done by Air New Zealand in Christchurch.
Okay, that's very close to the fuel tanks. It's in the trailing edge of the centre section, and a bullet came through from this way. You know, you can see the metal as it's folded out. That's a 20 mil. That's very likely from an ME-109 fighter.
Britain's frontline fighter at the start of the war, the Hurricane was a basic aircraft, but getting a wreck like this back in the air will, in the end, take 3 years and a lot of money.
The figure of £1 million wouldn't be far away from its market value.
And what about what it costs to put it together?
Well, I mean, you're actually asking us what's our profit in it when you're asking that.
No, I just want to have some ideas. Across the other side of the world, the who's who of the aviation industry gather. The RAF sends its Hurricane, one of 3 left flying in the world. Tim Wallis is close to having the fourth.
Victory roll. Doesn't that sound nice? Doesn't that look nice? Makes it all worthwhile flying.
In the same way the tail was handed over a year earlier, the structure of the historic fighter is presented.
Warm English better instead of that cold lager after this. So I'd like now to hand over to Ian Carmichael, the engineering
This time, 2 of Tim's 4 sons and his wife, Lady Wallis, are here to share the moment of satisfaction.
Well, I guess I've got a knack or an ability to see something and then go for it. And most things I'm in, if you look back, are things that are pioneering, that nobody else has had a go at or prepared to have a go at. And once I actually prove it and people follow you, then I'm actually then looking for the next opportunity. So I'm actually trying to keep ahead of the play. And in doing that, I have a rather heavy set-up cost sometimes, but I have a time lead of 1 or 2 or 3 years before I need to be into the next thing.
Tim, what drives you?
Well, not money, the success of a challenge. That drives me. You know, the Hurricane, to see that, 18 months from when we started it, we're 50% there. 1997, in the spring of 1997, it'll fly. The Ishak, the little donkey, that's the I-16 in Russia. To see that get to the taxiable stage, and it nearly flew, but it will fly in the next week. We've been into this Russian project for 3 years, and we've made immense progress in that time. A lot of people wouldn't have given you sixpence to get where we've got to. A lot of people just totally didn't believe it. But look, we've got something that's flown.
History is made. An I-16 has been restored from scratch and flown for the first time in 50 years, thanks to the vision and determination of one man, half a world away.
9 минут полет, 9 раз качать.
Then, 3 months later, Tim Wallis crashed his Spitfire. He was to spend 6 weeks in Dunedin Hospital with a severe brain injury. He was given a 10 to 15% chance of ever regaining consciousness. But in a single-minded pursuit of her husband's recovery, Lady Wallis brought Tim home to Wanaka. He was unable to move, swallow, sit, speak, see or hear properly. But just days before Warbirds over Wanaka, the air show that means so much to him, Tim Wallis emerged from post-traumatic amnesia. private tent, Tim Wallis sat in a wheelchair and watched his own collection take to the sky.
And to put a freezer unit on it's going to cost $5,000.
Sir Tim Wallis is making a slow but steady recovery. He abandoned his wheelchair last September, and at his office in Wanaka, he now takes part in regular meetings with his business managers.
It needs to be able to handle those sorts of things.
You've had water with...
And each day he works with his own team of physio, occupational and speech therapists.
There's fires for sale in Christchurch.
The crash may have robbed him of some of his physical and mental strength, but it hasn't taken away an ounce of his determination. In true Tim Wallis style, more than ever, he's fighting back.
Yeah, so this is the first one that was...
And out in his backyard, he's got something no one else in the world has got.
This is a replica gun here. That's not the real thing, but the replica. So hopefully we'll get this painted in the next 2 or 3 weeks when the paint arrives and re-establish.
The I-16 has finally arrived in Wanaka. From Russia with love.
Since this program was made, Sir Tim has continued to make steady progress in his recovery and has now taken delivery of 3 Russian I-16s. The planes will have their first public outing next Easter at the Warbirds over Wanaka Air Show.